Time now, 7:50. Paul Michael Merhige, Casey Anthony, and terrorist on trial. Three big legal stories to watch for in 2010. It's this week's newsmaker. I'd like to welcome in criminal defense attorney Tama Beth Kudman. Good morning, Tama Beth. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. All right, let's get right into it. Let's start with Merhige. All right. Police say he murdered his 4 family members in Jupiter, of course, on Thanksgiving. He's on the run. When he finally turns up, what kind of defense could they have possibly for this dirtbag?
Well, clearly there's going to be an insanity.
And you won't call him a dirtbag because you have to defend people like this.
I try not to label people before I know all of the facts.
All right.
But it appears that he does have a psychiatric history, a very severe one, and so clearly there's going to be a psychiatric defense here.
And how successful can that be?
It can be very successful, but it depends on what you call successful. If a person's deemed not guilty by reason of insanity, they then get caught in the mental health system, and so they can be there for the rest of their lives as well. So he won't necessarily walk free, but it can be very successful if it's a legitimate mental health defense. And
they just have to track him down, first things first. Meantime, Casey Anthony trial will likely start next year. She's accused, of course, of murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. The judge says the prosecutors can seek the death penalty. What's the difference between going after a death penalty versus a normal murder case?
Well, in a death penalty trial, you've got 2 phases. First, there's the guilt or innocence phase, and then there's the penalty phase. And in the penalty phase, the same jury will hear all of the evidence about mitigating or aggravating circumstances surrounding the murder and decide whether or not to recommend death to the judge who ultimately makes that decision.
Why is this thing taking so long to get to trial?
Well, first of all, it's a very serious case. You've got murder charges. There are a lot of preliminary hearings and motions that have to be made. As you know, there were motions for change of venue. There are motions regarding the evidence and the suppression of evidence, motions regarding the death penalty itself. And so there have been a lot of preliminary matters that have had to be decided before the trial.
Terror trials in New York. 5 suspects could go on trial as early as the fall. What's the difference with the burden of proof for a civil court versus a military tribunal?
Well, it's not so much the burden of proof that's the issue, because you're still going to have beyond a reasonable doubt proof. But a military tribunal has fewer procedural safeguards than a civilian trial. First of all, in a civilian trial, first you have to have a grand jury convene, or there has to be a probable cause determination before the charges are even brought. In a military tribunal, that's not true. And also, there are some due process concerns, like the admission of tainted evidence. In a civilian court, we have something called fruits of the poisonous tree, which can't be admitted. In a military tribunal, if somebody is improperly questioned or tortured for a statement, the statement might be suppressed, but any evidence that's gathered from that statement can be admitted. And that's different from a civilian trial.
And the discovery here should be very interesting as well. So Merhige, Anthony, and the terrorist, all convicted in the court of public opinion. So, Tama, how do you, as a criminal defense attorney, how do people defend people like this and still have friends? How do they do it, Tama Beth? How can you, when they go to the public, they say, hey, why are you, not that you would represent these people, but how do they do it?
Well, I think you have to remember that what we're defending is exactly what the terror trials are about, and that is our civil liberties. What makes America so great is the fact that every person's individual liberties and rights are respected in this country. And so every day when I go to work, I feel very proud of the work that I do.
Even if you had to represent me, if I got in trouble for something?
I don't know, Ben, that's pushing it. We'll have to see.
All right, Tama Beth Kudman, thank you so much for joining us here on CBS 12 Daybreak. We are back in a moment.